All right, so I'm a last-minute substitution for the, I guess, the agenda item that was originally listed in the program. So if any of you are looking for Maven-specific stuff, you won't get it during the session, unfortunately. We're an Ant-based shop. Anyway, so today I'm going to be going through our Bamboo configuration and walking you through some detailed, low-level stuff, walking through all our build plans, and hopefully give you guys some deep insight into how to configure Bamboo. So before we start, just to talk about, why do you use Bamboo? Why do you do continuous integration? So one of the big challenges in an agile development shop is, once you've done your iterative sprint, you've got your code ready to go, how do you actually, how quickly can you actually put it out the door? And if you put it out the door in that time, how confident are you in the quality of the code you're putting out? So that's where continuous integration plays a key role. We rely extremely heavily on it, and also a high level of unit test coverage to ensure high quality releases that we can release on very short notice. So first, a bit about our company. We're located in Newton, Massachusetts, founded August 2007. We have 45 employees. Basically what we do in a nutshell is called unified information access. It's a kind of a hybrid between data warehousing and enterprise search. That's as much as I'll say about it for now. What we're building, it's our active intelligence engine. It's a platform for unified information access. Fundamentally allows you to query unstructured and structured information with the precision of SQL and the fuzziness of search. If you have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer them after the presentation. But that's as deep as I'll go into the actual product details itself. In terms of how we ship our product, we are a shipped product. We're not hosted. So we do OEM and direct. We're embedded with other software, and we're also embedded on hardware devices, that sort of thing. We do 3 types of releases. We have a maintenance release window at the end of each sprint we allow ourselves. We also have minor releases every 3 to 4 months and major releases every 12 to 18. So how do we do builds? Key philosophy, automate everything. I feel incredibly lucky that our engineers all follow this philosophy to a T. And fundamentally, the way we build everything is we use Bamboo. So, and the other piece is also maintaining high quality. We have 8,000 plus automated tests that run with every check-in. We do code coverage analysis using Clover and use find bugs for static code analysis. And finally, we also use the Fisheye product to get source code insight and build failure insight as part of our automated build process. Turn this off. You have to unplug it, okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so a few more key product stats to understand how our continuous integration environment works. We're almost 100% Java, maybe 95% when you look at some C++ pieces we have. But we do embed, especially on our UIs that we ship with the product. We use Grails for one of them. We're also starting to use Flex more. In terms of how we install our software, we use Install4j, which is a Java-based installer I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with. Combination of XML configuration and GUI as well. Platforms we support, Linux, Windows, Solaris, 32, 64-bit. In terms of our build system, we use Ant. We've actually done a lot of work with Ant over the past 2 years. We've effectively almost rebuilt Maven using Ant at this point, I think. So I think it's definitely on our list of items to do is probably move to Maven at some point. But basically, we use heavy use of macro definitions and custom Ant tasks. We also have some nice JUnit wrappers we've created. Our top-level directory structure, we have a build import XML, which sets up all the tasks that are to be used by sub-projects. Then we do our own dependency management through macro def at the top level. In terms of source control, we use Subversion. So, okay, I think you probably can see that. This is our high-level build structure. Just to give you an idea, just to compare this against what you have and how your software is set up. Our standard common, our application, core components, and then we have modules, and then we have customer projects that also get run as part of our build. And the next level down, if you look into one of these components or module, this is the same structure that's repeated over and over again. So we have a very hierarchical structure. We end up doing a lot of recursive processing with our custom Ant tasks. Okay, branching methodology. It's important to understand what you're going to see in terms of screenshots. You will see some red. I'm actually not going to try to do a live demo today. I learned my lesson yesterday. I'm trying to do that. But in terms of branching methodology, there are 3 general types, unstable, stable, and agile. Unstable is the one we actually use. You end up with some more red that way, but it's far less overhead in terms of managing all these different branches. So in the agile case, for all of our components, we would have to branch off for any new feature we're doing and then merge it back in once we're done with that work. And we decided the overhead of doing that is just not worth it, and we rely more heavily on our unit test coverage to protect us there. So a little more detail about why we use the unstable branch. We just feel it fits better with our methodology. Like I said, not too many branches, far less merging. And the big point at the bottom here is that we're ready to release code pretty much at any time without having to do any extra merging or branching, primarily because of those 8,000 plus tests. And also the fact that we have, as you'll see when you go through the detailed builds, we actually have builds that run system integration, smoke, and performance tests as part of our daily builds as well. So general Bamboo configuration, as I mentioned, we have continuous integration. We do nightly builds. And we also have these system test builds that are kind of a thing that we've come up with. Continuous builds, pretty standard configuration, run on each check-in. Nightly builds are scheduled for each branch. And then we have the system test builds that depend upon the success of the nightly builds. And finally, the other interesting point about our configuration is that we're running on a VMware virtualization environment. So a quick overview of how our build agents are structured. Because of those C++ pieces, we have to have build agents on Linux, Solaris, Windows VMs. We actually have dedicated VMs that we leave up there where these agents are always on. So we're not spinning up VMs dynamically. We're just calling out the remote agents when we want to invoke the builds. A couple of interesting builds we have up here. We do run continuous build on release versions, so versions we have in the field that are supported. We do run continuous if someone checks in a bug fix there. We also have a code check build, which we've split out separately from other builds. That does our Clover code coverage, find bugs, that sort of thing. Just take that overhead out of our continuous build. There's not a lot of need to do that with every single check-in, but doing it once a day is sufficient. It also reduces overall build time, which I'll get into a little bit later. The other big piece here, this one next to the old version continuous with the QA installation and system tests. Those are those ones that actually take a full version of our product and run the full end-to-end test suite against them. So here are a list of all our build plans. And I'm going to go through these in detail in the next few slides. And I'm just going to focus on the ones that have some interesting characteristics and some things that we've done different from out-of-the-box configuration. So as I mentioned, the continuous is check-in triggered. We do nightly fulls on all the different platforms. We have that separate code check build, which includes not just Clover and Findbugs, but also Cobra Terra reports we've integrated, as well as FlexCover for testing our Flex code. The system test plans. We also have a separate set of plans that we're called QA test plans, but they're effectively the first version of our system test. So that you'll see we kind of we're halfway between and transitioning from version 1 of that to version 2. And also we have a continuous for our versions out in the field, as well as full builds, full nightlies for all the versions out in the field as well. Finally, we have the special build task, which I learned as a benefit of being at this conference is not really necessary anymore, I guess, with the latest version of Bamboo. But this is how we actually ensure that no matter when code's being checked in, that when we run our full builds and they kind of are staggered, that they all pick up the same revision and they build off the same revision. So this is a kind of a summary of this was taken probably last week, I think. As you can see, due to our unstable branching methodology, we do get red. The key point about being able to really not worry about the red so much is we can quickly see how many tests are failing. So if it's 1 or 2 tests out of 8,000, I feel pretty confident we can very quickly get those taken care of, get to green, and ship something out the door. So I kind of want to talk about the nightly, because the nightly they use that move to head tag build plan. So nightly builds are scheduled. To ensure version consistency, as I mentioned, we have this special plan. All it really does is kick off a little script that checks and sets a value for this is the revision number to use. So the operating specific builds are kicked off of that, and as well as the code coverage build plan is kicked off of the head tag, and the system test as well. So we have this whole series of builds that run. We have engineers who love to check things in at 3 a.m., so we want to make sure they don't make things inconsistent between builds out there. And then how we generate artifacts out of the nightly builds, we actually we short circuit the default behavior with artifacts. We actually use a symbolic link to copy them out to an NFS mount. So all of our artifacts, installer artifacts and stuff, rather than being copied to the default location, which I think is a local directory, that's actually mapped to a shared NFS. So we just found that's better for speed and performance of copying stuff. It's easier for us to maintain a single repository for released artifacts. So this is actually a little bit of interesting configuration on one of our full builds. So we use there's a post-build plugin that allows you to run custom scripts after post-build. So what we do, and this is picked up by our QA and system tests, we indicate based on the success or failure of the build, we kind of just write a little file that says, okay, this is the latest good version. This is the latest build version. So our QA tests will run. They'll just pick up the last known good build that was done in terms of the artifacts that were generated. And as you can see here, just basic example of very standard dependencies out of Bamboo. So that QA plan is kicked off only after the x64 build is completed. Okay, as I mentioned, the code coverage build runs separately from the other ones to reduce build time. I spent a little time talking about build time here. It's one of the key problems I think everyone has hit at one time or another. Your builds just start taking a long time. You have a lot more code, you have a lot more tests, and all of a sudden, if someone wants to get feedback as to if they've broken something, they have to wait 45 minutes in our case is where we're at today. And I've been talking with the Bamboo team quite a bit, and probably a lot of you have seen presentations on the test optimization features coming out, so we're definitely going to go back to the office and take a look at those and see if those will help us reduce our build times. And as I mentioned before, some of the artifacts we produce, Clover, Corbitaire, and Finebugs. Now, we don't use Bamboo's integrated Clover report, so you have the ability in Bamboo to see Clover output. We can see the very high level, these are the total test coverage numbers, but we actually generate separate reports for each of the modules in our system, just primarily because of how that build directory structure is set up. We recursively traverse it and create individual reports for each module. So this is a fairly recent screenshot of one of those reports. This is our core code reports. 83-point-something% up there. I can't quite read it, but system test builds. These are these special ones that basically take that, like I mentioned, that known good installer, can install in one or more nodes. It can be multiple JVMs on the build box, or it can be actual remote nodes that we have out there. VM nodes are real hardware, and then runs functional and performance tests, so it can load up data, load up configurations, run performance tests against it, generate reports, and then the key thing here is the third bullet point. When these tests fail, they produce JUnit-like outputs. They show up in Bamboo just like a JUnit failure would on our regular continuous build. So this is just a quick list of, we're still under our system test plan. This is the latest version of it. We've only got a handful of tests so far built up, but I don't know if you can read these, but some of these are like 3-node tests or multiple index tests, that kind of thing. So they're definitely running against different data sets as well. So the QA builds, like I said, these are the first version of our system test builds. And they use that post-build plugin to do the successful, unsuccessful builds. We're actually modifying it now so that anytime you get a successful artifact, even if a test or two fails, as long as you have a successful installer built, we will pick that up and test that as well, just so we get find as many problems as we can at once so that people can start working on them in parallel. All right, I think that's okay. So unfortunately, it's probably impossible to read back there, but this is if you're curious, we get the Q&A section. I can pull up some live stuff and up the font size. You can see it, but this is basically what one of these files looks like in terms of how we define a custom system installation. So this actually is defining things, base ports to start up various nodes on, especially when you're running on multiple nodes on the same box. You have to set different base ports for everything to work off of. So. This is actually a framework that I think we're probably going to open source and put out there for free, just because we don't want to be in the business of selling it. We think it's pretty valuable, so we'll be putting that out. And final point is a couple of post-build automation pieces. These are things that we've built that help us manage our artifacts. One thing we've done is we've created a script that basically reads a JavaDoc directory tree and creates a wiki space out of it. So it actually creates the hierarchy plus all the links and everything, and that allows you to not only, you can browse the JavaDoc through the tree control, but also search your JavaDoc as well. So we've just made that part of our build process where that space gets updated and populated after full nightly builds. And the final point is we generate hotfixes out of Bamboo, and we basically just link to the artifacts from our Confluence wiki to keep track of the latest hotfixes that are available for any given release. All right, so I went through that pretty quickly in the hopes that we have some good time for Q&A. From my perspective, the big takeaways about why we use Bamboo, the biggest ones are the quality of our software. You can't emphasize enough that having continuous integration really gives us confidence on any given day as we know how close we are to release, what's the quality of our software. And we've been very successful in terms of putting it out in the field and having very, very low defect rates from customer installations. So it's quality, time to market, and the ability to release when you need to release. So at this point, I'd like to take any questions you guys have. Okay, the question was, do we use Bamboo to make release builds? And yeah, the answer is yes. We just take, any of those general artifacts that get generated off the full build, if we're in the release cycle, if the full build's green, that's a release candidate. We'll pick it up and we'll do some basic manual acceptance testing, but we're trying to automate as much testing as we can and really almost make acceptance testing an automated piece as well. Back in the back? We use Selenium. So yeah, we do have Selenium tests in there. We also use Fluent as the Flex unit testing tool as well. And that's one we don't have that much experience with yet. We just started putting into practice. But yeah, we definitely test our UIs as well, the same system.
Do you use anything from launching builds based on my events in Jira?
So actually triggering the build running by Jira? Yeah, we don't do that at this point. We don't. The way we use Jira, I'm not sure it would necessarily correlate directly to it. So, all right, back there.
Do you guys get any coverage metrics for Selenium tests?
Yes, we use. The Selenium generates. I hope I'm not misspeaking here, but they generate JUnit tests effectively. So I think that those will show up in the coverage numbers. Actually, and I think that's why we use Cobra Terra. I believe that's where we do some coverage there as well. Oh, that's for Grails, actually. I'm sorry. That's right. Does that make sense? All right. Sorry.
On your nightly build, do you build on various platforms? But I assume like on your continuous integration build, it's just on one platform.
Yeah, we just do Linux 64-bit.
Is there problems like finding out later that continuous integration doesn't catch things on different platforms?
Yeah, there are absolutely problems we've had that are, especially with Solaris. We've had a lot of fun with Solaris. But the thing is, even if it doesn't get caught that day, you catch it on the nightly. So it's not a terrible, you wait a little bit longer. Those issues tend to be a little more rare because they come into play when someone's working on one of these third-party modules that's C++ based and they're dealing with static library linking and that kind of stuff. But most of the Java things you don't have a problem with. So.
What's your overhead spend on managing your build environment?
Well, it's a good question. We actually, just last month, finally got a dedicated release engineer, but we had actually been sharing the responsibility amongst the engineering team. So we kind of did a rotating schedule of, once a week someone is the build manager, and their job was just to kind of send a summary around of, here's what's failed, do some investigation. Because of the integration into Bamboo with Jira and looking at Fisheye, it's pretty easy to find out if it's a real failure, like an actual just bad code or something, a bug in the code. You're going to find out pretty quickly who's responsible. Most people pick it up themselves very quickly. But we do have some cases where we have intermittent test failures, and that's sometimes due to poor test design. So it's hard to tell when those occur. So we created some classes that let you run a JUnit test in a tight loop just to try, hundreds of times to try to see if you can get it to fail. But that's one where the build manager role gets a little more intensive, trying to hunt those kind of things down because they can be pretty tough to recreate. But now we have a dedicated release engineer. I think he's got plenty of time to actually continue to automate things and get this in hand. So it's a pretty good system right now. It's pretty tight for the size team we have.
How are you using Clover within your process, and also what improvements have you made relative to performance in Fisheye?
Well, okay. So the question was, how do we use Clover, and then also how do we make any improvements with Fisheye? So for Clover, we have ant tasks, and we actually do the Clover command line, and that's because of the module structure we have. So we invoke Clover, generate the reports, and we don't ship with less than 80% any module. So if something's less than 80%, ticket gets created, it gets assigned to someone, they have to bring the coverage up to that level. Now in terms of Fisheye, so can you clarify the question a bit?
Just performance-wise, what tuning or modifications have you done on your install to increase the
For Bamboo build times, or in what way?
Scanning repositories, for example, sizes of log and namespaces.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the optimizations we've done at this point, we're a pretty small development team. We have basically 8 core development engineers who've been doing this process. So a lot of the speed improvements we made around builds have primarily been with making faster unit tests. Testing seems to be the biggest time, the thing that takes the most time when running our thorough scenarios. So every few months we go through and clean up the tests, find some bad tests that have been written, that sort of thing. But we're really hoping the test optimization proves more of a long-term fix. Anyone else? Back.
Do you also have a manual test QA team?
Yeah, we actually, but it's a very small team. We have 3 QA engineers, and their focus really is on targeting big features that we put in. So they go after the ones we think there's high risk, and we basically say, okay, we want you to go in and load these different sets of data, really put this thing through its paces, get us performance benchmarks, let's know if we're performing or not. So they're very focused there, and they also do manual acceptance testing at the end before each release. But it's really, effectively our acceptance testing is we have our documentation, a lot of how-to documentation. So a lot of it's just walking through that documentation, validating this thing's not dead on arrival and everything installs. You can do the basic end-to-end type testing on it. So acceptance testing is a few days or less usually. Oh, yeah, absolutely. They write they write these big end-to-end tests and the performance tests. They write them using our system test infrastructure. So they just create an XML file that defines what the test looks like. So we have some interesting things like, so we're in information access. So we're a platform and we get a lot of different types of data coming into the system. So we have random data generators that we have that allow you to parameterize how you generate data. We also generate queries based on what data you generated randomly in that. So we can do query performance that exercises our caches and stuff like that. So. Anyone else?
You said you use the JUnit line outputs. How do you do that?
It's basically through custom ant tasks, that write outputs that gets picked up by Bamboo. So just like the regular JUnit test put out output that Bamboo can display and looks for, we do the same thing with our system tests.
Like writing a JUnit line XML file.
Yeah.
Java to wiki, how do you solve that?
It's basically a script that may actually be written in Python, I think. I'm not sure off the top of my head. It's one of these things where one of our engineers, basically the problem came up because we were using hosted Confluence for a while, and we wanted to expose our Java doc, but we wanted it to have the same security rules around who can see it and access it, and you couldn't do that with the hosted service. So we came up with this plugin that puts it on as a wiki space, so it makes it very easy. We create some little macros that let you create a Java doc macro, and that links you to the Java doc space. And we found, though, we really like the interface. We like being able to search the Java doc just very easily and have stuck with that. So that's definitely one we're going to put out in our blog pretty soon. Definitely open source that one. Any other?
You mentioned hotfixes.
Yep.
Does Bamboo actually play a role in generating these hotfixes, or just in your case, going to be patches or full software?
So yeah, hotfixes are a whole interesting topic. So what we do is, let's try how to describe it. So we'll actually, it's kind of like a patch, but it's a little more than that. Actually, it's we build the software and take any modified jars, and just take those jars and you just take the set of jars you need to replace, essentially, and that becomes the hotfix. We're definitely looking at automating it, though. Our release engineer, he's got great ideas about this, and we'd love to have it be, I want to cut a hotfix on this, and it'll take the diff, and it will just automatically create the zip file. The hotfixes are pretty easy to apply with Java. It's just an unzip operation. We drop it in. But yeah, we definitely kick them off of, we run the full test suite on the version plus the hotfix. So that's where it does play a role. So we make sure we run all our tests on it. All right, anyone else? All right, well, I just want to thank Ken and Atlassian for giving me a chance to speak here, and please fill out the surveys. It's great feedback to get, and thanks again.